This is not a story about a mistake. This is a story about the consequences. And in the end, you will understand why I am no longer the same person I was. The morning air was thick with the smell of pine and last night's humidity, clinging to my skin like a warning I couldn't quite shake. I came in through the side door, shoes scuffed from the trail and shirt clinging to my back, sweat tracing lines down my neck. The house was still, quiet, too still. For a second, I thought Julia might still be asleep, but then I saw it, laid out on the couch like it belonged, spine creased open on a glossy ad for oceanfront living, a yachting magazine. I stopped mid-stride, brows twitching. We didn't sail. Hell, neither of us had ever shown the faintest interest in the water unless it was a beach resort and a frozen drink in hand. I stared at that cover for a long second, letting my mind sift through excuses she might have given if I asked. But I didn't. I walked past it, made a mental note. Sometimes you learn more by pretending not to see. The next day brought something subtler, but not by much. Julia had always carried the same worn passport case she'd had since college, a navy one with faded gold stitching and a corner that peeled. But this time, during breakfast, a new burgundy leather cover sat on the island counter beside her mug, pristine and embossed with her initials, JLA. I waited for her to say something, to explain. She didn't. Instead, she passed me the jam and casually mentioned, between bites of toast, that she'd signed up for a few navigation lessons. Just curious, she said. Just something fun. In case we ever get stranded on a boat or some movie stuff, she joked, smiling too brightly. I nodded, too slowly. Later that morning, she talked about a travel-related startup, eyes flickering to the left when I pressed for details. Said she was trying something new. I asked how long she'd been working on it. She hesitated, said it was all early stage. I didn't push. I smiled, poured another cup of coffee, and made sure to write it down in my journal once she left the kitchen. Her answers didn't match her behavior. They never did when she was lying. That same week, a faint buzz from the printer in the den pulled me out of a nap. I walked in, expecting a kid's school paper or some random coupon she'd forgotten to cancel, but instead I found a boarding pass. Crisp, single-sided, no return flight listed. The name read J.L. Adams, a ghost she'd slipped into like a second skin. The flight was international. I stared at it longer than I should have, the light blinking amber from the printer tray. Again, I said nothing. That night, she was in the kitchen, perched on a stool, laptop angled away from the hallway. I didn't announce myself. I just stood silently by the archway. She didn't hear me at first, not until I took a slow step forward. The sound of the screen slamming shut snapped through the room like a mousetrap. She turned around too quickly, smiled too hard, and asked if I wanted tea. Later, when she fell asleep on the couch pretending to watch a documentary, I logged into her Google account on the desktop. Her password hadn't changed. She wasn't cautious, just careless enough to make me believe she didn't think I'd ever check. That's when I saw it, an email from someone labeled Mariner Services, with the subject line, Catamaran, flight confirmed. The body of the email was simple: coordinates, date, confirmation number. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I took out my journal and copied every detail: the date, the time, the location. Then I drew a square around it in red ink. On the back page, I started crossing off days, one by one, like counting down to a storm you can't stop, only survive. Julia never noticed, or maybe she did, and she thought I wasn't paying attention. She was wrong. It was a Thursday when I came home early, keys still in hand, the front door drifting open quieter than usual. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, not the first time anyway. I stepped inside just in time to hear Julia's voice bleeding through the hallway like a slow leak. She was in the office, door cracked just enough to catch words that were never meant for me. Her voice was clipped, urgent, not the usual soft tone she used when pretending everything was fine. She was on a video call, her laptop camera angled somewhere out of view, and her hand was gripping the armrest like she was bracing for turbulence. All that's left is to pull the money and disappear. My foot froze mid-step. For one full breath, I stared at the floor like it might open beneath me. The sentence hovered in the air, thick and final. Then came the soft click of her laptop lid closing. Fast, abrupt. Silence. By the time she walked out, I was leaning casually by the stairs, pretending to scroll through an email. She gave me a quick smile, called out something about traffic being terrible, and asked if I wanted Thai for dinner. I said sure. I asked nothing, not yet. That night, over basil chicken and shrimp rolls, she told me she was flying to Florida to see her mother for the weekend. Her tone was rehearsed, lines too clean, timing too convenient. I asked which airline. She blinked. Delta, I think. I smiled and nodded, as if that detail wasn't already wrong. After she left the room, I went to the bedroom and quietly unzipped the side of her carry-on. I didn't have to dig far. Underneath a layer of workout clothes folded too neatly, I found a false bottom stitched into the fabric, a pocket I'd never seen before. Inside were 3 documents, crisp and copied, not originals, one listing the full deed to our house, another authorizing a private transfer of property, and the third outlining a sale agreement with a notary seal dated just last week. She wasn't just running, she was trying to sell everything we built. The next morning, I walked into the bank, calm as a Sunday sermon. I asked for a printout of recent transactions. The manager hesitated but obliged, probably sensing the steel in my voice. The number on the printout made me blink. $48,000 wired to an account in Miami. No joint authorization, no mention, no explanation. Back home, I opened the drawer in the hallway table where Julia kept miscellaneous receipts, gym memberships, returns, dry cleaning tags. Nestled between old birthday cards and a takeout menu was a notary receipt. The address listed matched the office on the deed transfer. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't panic. It was preparation. I didn't say a word. Not to her. Not even to myself. That same evening, I started fresh. Bought a new external hard drive, small enough to hide in the garage's back paneling, where I kept old tax forms and camping gear we never used. I backed up everything. Bank statements, scanned copies of what I'd found, photos of the hidden documents. I labeled the folder Nest, quiet, private. Then I went digital. Accessed her phone through the cloud backup, something she'd forgotten about months ago when we switched plans. Inside her messages was a thread with a number saved only as R. I scrolled through slowly, letting each message tighten the knot in my stomach. After 5 p.m., the key is under the 3rd stone. No names, no emotion, just clean instructions. The kind of language you use when you're used to not getting caught. I saved the entire thread as a PDF and transferred it to a flash drive, which I placed in the hollow space behind the circuit breaker panel in the basement. My own insurance policy, Julia called out to me from the living room. She was watching a movie, laughed at something, asked if I wanted to join her. I said I'd be right there. I took a breath, closed the backup window, and tucked the flash drive case shut. The pieces weren't falling apart. They were lining up, and I was still holding the frame. It was just before midnight when I installed the first camera in the garage. I waited until Julia left for another yoga class that had somehow started requiring her to bring a duffel bag and end with an Uber from the far side of town. I told her I'd be working late and kissed her forehead before she walked out the door. As soon as the lock clicked behind her, I moved fast. I had ordered a set of miniature motion-triggered cams. No Wi-Fi, no broadcast, just silent internal memory, easy to retrieve. One above the workbench facing the driveway. One tucked behind the ladder in the far corner. The last inside the overhead shelf where I'd seen her rummaging days earlier. I tested the angles, checked the storage, and locked up before she returned. She never noticed the faint metallic glint behind the paint cans. She never looked back. 4 days later, I watched from the upstairs window as Julia moved through the garage with purpose. She opened the trunk of the car, looked around quickly, then slid a heavy black duffel inside. I zoomed in through the lens of the monitor, pausing when I saw the corner of a white envelope sticking out of the zipper, labeled in neat handwriting, by July 22nd. That was 17 days from now. It wasn't a casual plan, it was a deadline. That night I didn't confront her. I didn't ask about the bag, the envelope, or why she looked over her shoulder twice before stepping back into the house. Instead, I stayed up creating something she wouldn't see coming. I made a fake social media account, clean profile picture, 10 generic posts, a few connections to friends of friends she'd never recognize. Then I reached out to her lover. I knew enough from the chat logs and flight confirmations. A man who referred to her as L, short for a name she never used around me. He fancied himself a free spirit. Cryptic Instagram posts, deep quotes about the sea, and a bio that mentioned his independent consulting firm, which was nothing more than a shell company tied to the same Miami bank where our money had vanished. I messaged him posing as an investor interested in funding a nautical startup. Said I was scouting entrepreneurs involved in luxury catamaran operations. Told him I'd seen his site, that I was intrigued. He replied within the hour. 2 days later, I set the meeting. Public cafe downtown, late afternoon, no red flags. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed casual, just another guy with a laptop. He walked in 5 minutes late, wearing a navy shirt unbuttoned at the neck and sunglasses that didn't belong indoors. When he sat down across from me, expecting a stranger, I let him speak first. He introduced himself, asked about the venture. I didn't answer. I just looked up and asked quietly, "When was the last time you stole from your partner's woman?" He blinked, confused, off balance. Then I raised my phone and took a single photo. Nothing dramatic, just one clean frame. I stood, slid the chair back gently, and walked away without another word. He didn't follow. The next morning I changed everything. Email passwords, security questions, even the backup codes she didn't know existed. I reset cloud access, revoked authorizations on all joint financial tools, and blocked her credit cards with one quiet call to the bank. I didn't drain the accounts, but I moved the cash from our joint account into a trust I set up the day after our first anniversary. It had always been there, dormant, quiet, until now. Then I went to the bank in person, spoke to the same manager from before, and added a permanent restriction on any real estate activity involving our home. "No transactions without my notarized presence," I said. He raised an eyebrow. I showed him copies of the documents I found. He nodded slowly, stamped the form, and locked the account from future changes. That evening, Julia was home early. She brought takeout, smiled like we were still in love, and asked if I wanted to watch something light. I said sure, and I meant it, because soon nothing in her world would be light again. The SUV was gone by Monday. I sold it to a retired firefighter who showed up with a cashier's check and a firm handshake. No questions, just a smile and a promise to take good care of it. Julia had always insisted we needed the space, the safety features, the brand. But what we really needed was mobility, and I wasn't going to leave the keys to our life in a driveway she was trying to walk away from. I left her the sedan. Something about the gesture felt poetic. The next item was smaller, silent, almost invisible. A listening device, no bigger than a USB, slid behind a bookshelf in the home office, where she took most of her calls. It was voice-activated, triggered only when someone spoke within 3 feet. I checked the first recordings 2 nights later. Most were quiet, the shuffle of papers, a Spotify ad, the hum of the air vent. But then came a voice, sharp and careless, as if she'd already forgotten to fear. "Gavin still doesn't know. We're pulling the cash next week and that's it. Cape Coral is waiting." Cape Coral. The name rang out like a final bell in a boxing match. She'd picked the destination, drawn the line, set the countdown. She wasn't just fleeing, she was relocating, possibly disappearing for good. That night, I didn't sleep. I packed. By dawn, I had the kids in the car, strapped into the back seat with snacks and pillows, thinking we were going to Grandma and Grandpa's for a weekend surprise. They didn't ask why I was quiet. They just smiled and sang along to the road trip playlist I had queued since 3 a.m. The miles peeled away like dead skin, and by the time we hit Georgia, I was breathing normally for the first time in weeks. At my parents' house, the welcome was warm, but wordless. My mother looked at my face, then at the kids, and said nothing. Just opened the door wider and started cooking. My father handed me a beer and turned on the sprinklers like it was any other Saturday. I sat on the porch swing, watching the sun dip behind the trees, the children laughing in the backyard, unaware that they'd just been lifted out of a vanishing act. Back home, Julia woke up to an empty house. She called me 3 times in 20 minutes. By the 4th, her voice cracked on the voicemail. "Where are the kids? Where are you?" I didn't respond. Let her sit in it. Let her try to explain to the police why she couldn't locate her children without admitting that she hadn't been present enough to know when they left. The officers filed a report, but I had custody papers in process, already filed by a local attorney in Georgia. The footage, the messages, the audio, I handed them all over. Every lie, every plan, every sentence she thought was buried in private. The next step was public. I compiled clips of the recordings, short but damning, and sent them to every mutual friend we shared. I didn't editorialize. No captions. Just the truth, raw and uneased. Within hours, the group chat we'd been part of for years, birthdays, barbecues, vacations, erased her number. Nobody replied, but I saw the exits pile up. Then I took it one step further. I messaged her yoga studio anonymously, including an excerpt where she joked about using business funds to test a beach startup with someone who isn't my husband. The response was swift. Membership revoked. Her local school board, where she volunteered once a month, received a link to a different clip, one in which she laughed about pulling off the cleanest break since my ex's lease expired. She lost both positions in a day. I didn't say a word. Not to her, not to anyone else. The message was clear. You don't get to disappear with the prize if you rig the game. The envelope was hand-delivered by courier just after 9 a.m. No drama, no warning, just a signature required and a brown class folder that looked like any other corporate delivery. But inside, the paper told a different story. 4 sheets, no cover letter, 4 pieces of ruin. The first was a printout of a $12,000 reimbursement request Julia had filed with her employer, tied to what she claimed were event expenditures for a travel launch party. The company's accounting software flagged it because the LLC she listed as vendor didn't exist before March. The address? A P.O. box in Miami. The owner? A consulting agency registered under a proxy ID, one that traced directly to her lover's name when we drilled past the firewall. The second sheet held an audio transcript, taken from a conversation recorded in the home office, the one where she always closed the door behind her and kept a wine glass just out of frame for the Zoom calls. "12's nothing," she said. "They never look at amounts under 15. If it gets flagged, we just reclassify it as creative strategy." Then came the laughter. Not the nervous kind. The kind that meant she thought the world was permanently tilted in her favor. The third was simpler. An email from her work address to a private luxury service, asking for catamaran photo staging, champagne, wardrobe prep, and sunset-ready equipment. She signed it with her title and included her direct company number. The fourth sheet wasn't official at all, just one line in my own handwriting. I thought they should see the real pitch. That afternoon, Julia was pulled into a meeting she didn't walk back out of. Her boss didn't speak to her directly. HR did. Security walked her to her car. While she stood outside that glass building, wondering how the floor vanished beneath her feet, I launched the second phase, a website I'd quietly developed on an anonymous server. Simple design, no colors, just facts. It was titled Adam's Discrepancy Archive. Inside, I uploaded digital copies of everything: her email threads, chat logs, voice recordings, bank transactions. The interface was clean, almost sterile. No commentary, just evidence. I didn't post it anywhere. I didn't need to. I sent it to 6 people. People who had always mattered more to her than I did. Her mentor from graduate school. 2 board members she'd once bragged about winning over. Her old roommate, her uncle, and her father. It was him I expected to take the longest. He didn't. Within the week, her name vanished from the family trust records. She was removed from all board approvals and group planning sessions. The family group chat, the one where birthdays were celebrated and Sunday dinner locations decided, dimmed. Then came the notification, "Julia has left the conversation." It didn't take long for her friends to follow. I didn't ask them to. They just went silent, like people who'd suddenly realized they'd been clapping for someone who was stealing from the stage. 2 days later, she came home. She stood on the porch like someone who no longer remembered the floor plan. Her bag was worn. Her clothes were layered wrong for the weather. The sun made her squint, like she hadn't slept in a real room in days. I waited behind the door until the second knock before opening it. She didn't say my name. Her eyes darted to the trash bags stacked neatly by the step, each one tagged with a Sharpie. Closet A through F, jewelry drawer, office files. Folded clean, no anger. On top of the pile was a single printout of a quote she thought I'd never read again. Gavin is just a cover. She stepped forward, but the door didn't budge. I hadn't changed the lock. I had simply chosen when it no longer opened for her. That evening, I filed a federal complaint. Fraud, identity misuse, and unreported income flagged over 2 fiscal years. The IRS began their quiet inquiry. I sent along a digital folder marked 2 years of lies, complete with attachments, links, and login metadata she never realized I was logging. The following morning, she tried the back window. I'd already set the alarm system, one that logged entry attempts and dialed directly to the county dispatch line. The police were there in under 7 minutes. She stood outside trembling, calling it a mistake. They wrote a report. I handed them the court order. No contact. Later that day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Please, just one more chance. I didn't block it. I saved it, added it to the file. She was unraveling, but she didn't know how much further she had left to fall. She came back for the window. It was just past midnight when the glass sensor tripped. Soft chime, quick blink, followed by the shrill crescendo of the alarm system I'd installed just 2 weeks earlier. I stood in the hallway barefoot, back pressed to the wall, listening to the scuffle outside. The noise stopped quickly, replaced by flashing blue lights cresting the end of our street. By the time I stepped onto the porch, the cruiser had already parked across the driveway, 2 officers flanking her, asking questions. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She looked lost. I handed them the court order, freshly stamped. One of the officers glanced at it, nodded, and turned back toward her. She started to protest, said something about shared ownership, her name being on the house. But the law didn't care about broken promises or who used to bake the birthday cakes. They cared about signatures, timestamps, evidence. And I had it all. That night, she didn't go far. I saw her sedan parked 3 blocks over the next morning under the shadow of a dead tree outside a gas station. She stayed there for 3 nights, never knocked again. Just sat behind the wheel, staring at the dash like it might explain how everything slipped through her hands. I didn't call the police again. I didn't have to. She wasn't a threat anymore, just a ghost clinging to the edges of a life she no longer had access to. She tried one last time, a new number, a phone call this time. I let it ring 5 times before I picked up, not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed one last piece. Her voice was raw, tired, no trace of the calm, rehearsed Julia from before. Just gravel now. I made a mistake, she said. I wanted to run away with the money because you never had ambition, because I thought I deserved more, and I was wrong. I didn't speak. I just let the silence pull her deeper. I didn't think you'd fight me, she added, almost with disbelief. I thought you'd just stay. That was the line I needed. I hit record mid-call, didn't say a word, and let her talk for 4 more minutes. She confessed to everything: planning the sale, transferring the money, installing the cloud keylogger that gave her access to my bank activity 6 months earlier. I saved the audio, ran a voice verification protocol, and sent it straight to my lawyer. The next morning, I filed the final divorce petition. We'd already been separated physically and financially. The only thing left was the legal coda. My attorney submitted the recording as evidence: premeditation, financial deceit, malicious intent. The judge didn't ask for clarification. He just signed. Full custody, permanent restraining order. Her parental access, revoked. Her digital keys to school accounts, medical records, even emergency contact privileges, wiped clean within the hour. The school principal was waiting for my call. He updated their records while his secretary removed her from the authorized pickup list. My son's pediatrician followed the same steps. I didn't leave anything open. No way for her to dig back in. The next day, I sat in front of my laptop and scrubbed my name, changed the public database entries, updated every platform where she might find us: school portals, insurance records, even online grocery deliveries. I kept the kids' last names for now, but the paperwork for that was already in motion. She wouldn't know where we lived, where they studied, or what time I picked them up from chess club. That same night, I walked through the house, room by room, removing the last of what was hers. Her books, her perfumes, the framed photo by the stairwell. Not because I was bitter, because it was finished. No screams, no dramatic final words. Just her voice recorded on a file titled Confirmation, sitting in a folder called Freedom, backed up to a secure drive and encrypted in 3 layers. She thought ambition meant escape. She never realized mine was survival. It was a month later when she came back. The house was quiet that afternoon, light pouring through the windows in long golden sheets that made the floors look freshly polished. I had just come in from the shop, my hands still rough from sanding down the leg of a bench I'd started that morning, when I heard it. 3 knocks. Not urgent, not timid, just tired. I opened the door and there she was, Julia. She looked like someone who had been chasing the sun across 3 states and never caught it. Her hair pulled back in a loose knot, her jacket wrinkled at the elbows, and a backpack slung over one shoulder, sagging with weight. No jewelry, no perfume, just raw skin and a look that couldn't quite meet mine. "I've been living in my car," she said quietly, her voice hoarse. "I've got nowhere left to go." For a second I said nothing, just studied her face, wondering how many lies could be buried in that tired expression, how many games she still thought she could play. Then I stepped back, not to let her in, but to grab something from the side table by the wall. It was an envelope, already prepared. Inside, a one-way bus ticket to a rehab center just outside Asheville, tucked into the mountains, quiet, with a reputation for privacy and long-term recovery. I had researched it the night she tried the back window, paid for it the same day the IRS emailed their confirmation of case review. I handed it to her without a word. She looked down at it, stunned, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something shift behind her eyes. Not guilt, not gratitude, recognition. "This is all I can do," I said. She stepped forward, maybe thinking she could hug me, reach for something familiar, some echo of warmth we used to have. But I stepped back before she could close the distance. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. I closed the door behind her. Inside, the house was still, the kind of stillness you don't realize you've been missing until it settles into your bones. I walked back to the workbench in the garage, picked up a chisel, and ran it slowly along the edge of a thick slab of oak. There was no anger left in me, no satisfaction, just breath, wood, motion. Something that felt like peace, but not the fragile kind, the earned kind. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the boys. We ate simple: grilled cheese, tomato soup, sliced apples. They laughed about a science project and asked if we could go hiking that weekend. I nodded, promising we would, promising I'd be there. After dinner, when they were brushing their teeth, I opened a document that had been sitting on my desktop for 3 weeks, a petition to change their last name. I filled in the final section, selected the box marked "Father requests sole name authority," and typed in the name they would carry moving forward. Not hers, not mine, ours. Then I created a new Instagram account, not for me, for the business. The one I'd started from that old Virginia workshop with hand tools and too many late nights. The profile picture was the shop's sign, freshly stained, mounted above the door just last weekend. G and Sons. The first photo I posted was a close-up of the sign itself. Wood grain, burned-in lettering, no caption. Didn't need one. She had tried to vanish with the money, but I had already taken back the legacy. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.